Peace and grace to you, beloved child of God. There are moments in life when God quietly steps into the story you thought was finished and begins rewriting it with a tenderness you didn't see coming. Moments when the chapters you believed were closed start to breathe again. Moments when the love you thought you lost is gently lifted back into the light, restored, refined, reshaped in ways only the hands of God can create. And if you're here right now listening to this very message, then hear me clearly. This is not a coincidence. This is not an accident. This is not random. Your heart was guided here because something in your story is being touched by the one who holds all things together. Maybe you've been moving through a season of silence. Maybe you've been carrying a mixture of peace and ache. Maybe a part of you still feels connected to someone, even though the world told you to forget. Maybe you've tried to close your heart, distract your mind, or force yourself forward, but something kept whispering, "This isn't the end." And that whisper wasn't weakness. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't longing clinging to the past. It was discernment. It was the Holy Spirit. It was God reminding you that He has the final say over every relationship meant for your life. There is a kind of love that doesn't disappear just because circumstances got complicated. There is a kind of connection that doesn't fade just because timing broke down. There is a kind of truth that doesn't die just because distance grew. And for some of you, that is exactly the love God is touching right now. Not in the old form. Not in the old patterns. Not in the broken version that once wounded you. But in a renewed, softened, matured, God-aligned form, reshaped by healing, humility, quiet reflection, and divine timing. This message isn't about fantasy. It isn't about illusion. It isn't about forcing something broken. This is about God restoring only what He has purified. This is about two hearts being prepared separately so they can meet again with grace instead of fear, love instead of avoidance, truth instead of confusion. And before I take you into today's teaching, before I share what God has been rewriting in your story, and how this reunion is forming, I want to pause and speak to your heart. You deserve a love that chooses you with peace, not pressure. You deserve a love that communicates with honesty, not mixed signals. You deserve a love that shows evidence, not promises. And God knows that. He has seen what you've endured. He has heard the prayers you prayed in the quiet. He has felt the weight you carried behind your smile. That is why He is rewriting the story, not to give you more pain but to give you redemption. Not to drag you backward but to restore what needed healing. Not to open old wounds but to show you what transformation really looks like. If you are ready to walk through this revelation, I want you to stay with me until the very end of this message. I promise you, there is something in the last few minutes of this video that will give you the clarity, the comfort, and the confirmation you've been praying for. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do. This channel is your space for healing, wisdom, and spiritual clarity. This is where you come when your heart needs a soft, steady voice that reminds you, God is still writing your story. Now breathe. Open your heart. And let's walk into what heaven has been preparing for you. Let's begin now. Number 1, God had to separate you to heal you. There comes a moment in every God-written love story when separation is not a punishment but a prescription. A moment when God steps between two people, not to destroy what they have, but to heal what they never addressed. A moment when distance becomes the very tool heaven uses to make room for growth, softening, and clarity. And for you, that's exactly what happened. You weren't separated because you weren't enough. You weren't separated because the love was weak. You weren't separated because they didn't care. You were separated because God saw the places inside both of you that were hurting, the places that love alone couldn't fix. And He knew healing had to happen before reunion could ever be safe, healthy, or lasting. For many of you, you went through a period where everything suddenly felt fragile. Communication broke down. Timing pulled you in opposite directions. Misunderstandings piled up. Walls rose faster than either of you knew how to tear them down. And in that moment, instead of forcing the connection, God created space. Because sometimes the most loving thing God can do is pull two people apart long enough for them to see themselves clearly. Long enough for old wounds to surface. Long enough for emotional patterns to be revealed. Long enough for both hearts to realize that something deeper needed attention. You may have blamed yourself during that season. You may have thought you weren't giving enough, loving enough, showing enough, doing enough. But God wasn't trying to break you. He was trying to rebuild you. He wasn't trying to make you question your worth. He was trying to show you how deeply you mattered. You were becoming someone who doesn't shrink when things get uncertain. Someone who doesn't chase out of fear. Someone who doesn't settle for half-expressed love. Someone who knows the difference between a relationship and a soul assignment. And while you were growing, something was happening on their side too. They were being confronted by their patterns, their fears, their wounds, their silence, their emotional distance, their tendency to withdraw instead of communicate, their instinct to run when love gets real. And God wasn't gentle with those patterns. Not because he wanted to hurt them, but because he wanted to free them. He knew they couldn't show up for you the way you deserved if they didn't first face what was buried inside of them. This is why separation was necessary. Because if God had allowed the relationship to continue the way it was, its foundation would have cracked under the weight of unspoken pain. You would have ended up carrying more than your heart was designed to hold. They would have leaned on you instead of healing. And the story would have collapsed, not because of a lack of love, but because of a lack of transformation. So God pulled you apart so he could work on you in peace. He pulled you apart so he could work on them without distraction. He pulled you apart so what was meant for you would not be lost but purified. This is what many people never understand. When God is rewriting a love story, he does not repair it in the presence of chaos. He repairs it in silence. He repairs it in separation. He repairs it in stillness. And every moment you spend thinking, why did this fall apart? God was whispering, I'm building something stronger. Every moment you cried, why did they leave? He was saying, I'm healing what they couldn't show you. Every moment you thought, is this really over? He was preparing the chapter where reunion makes sense. This season didn't break your connection, it prepared it. Because now, when the two of you come back together, you won't come back as the old versions of yourselves. You'll come back as two hearts that have been humbled, softened, healed, and aligned. Not perfect, not flawless, not magically fixed, but ready, awake, whole. This is the foundation God needed to build before he could write the next chapter. Number 2, their hearts softened the moment God showed them the truth. There comes a turning point in every God-orchestrated connection when the heart that once felt guarded, confused, or overwhelmed suddenly begins to soften. Not because someone forced it, not because guilt pushed it, and not because loneliness drove it, but because God revealed something they could no longer ignore. And for the person connected to your story, that moment has already happened. It didn't happen in conversation. It didn't happen in an argument. It didn't happen in anything you initiated. It happened in the quiet place where God speaks the loudest, their own spirit. For a long time, they didn't fully understand the weight of what they felt for you. They didn't understand why they couldn't detach. Why your absence echoed louder than anyone else's presence. Why certain memories replayed at random moments. Why a sense of unfinished business followed them even when life seemed full. They tried to rationalize it. They tried to explain it away. They tried to distract themselves. Some even tried to convince themselves they had moved on. But there was a place inside them that never agreed with those conclusions. A truth that refused to disappear. A pull that didn't weaken. A tenderness they didn't ask for but couldn't shut off. And then God stepped in. Not with a dramatic sign. Not with a lightning bolt revelation. But with a whisper that became impossible to ignore. For some of them, it came at night when the world was quiet. For others, it came while looking at something that reminded them of you. For others, it came while processing mistakes they made in past relationships. And for some, it came while praying, because yes, even if they never told you, they prayed about you. But however it came, the message was the same. You weren't ready before. But look at your heart now. And in that moment, something softened. Something melted. Something surrendered. They began seeing the truth God had been trying to show them all along. That your connection was not random. That your presence in their life carried purpose. That your love had a purity they didn't know how to hold before. That the way you cared for them wasn't ordinary, wasn't replaceable, wasn't casual. It was intentional, spiritual, and deeply aligned. And as their hearts softened, something else happened. They started seeing themselves with new eyes. They saw the ways they held back, the ways they avoided vulnerability, the ways they shut down instead of communicating, the ways they protected their hearts so much that they unintentionally wounded yours, the ways fear disguised itself as indifference, the ways hesitation kept them from fully receiving the love you offered. That awareness didn't crush them. It humbled them. It made them want to grow. It made them want to heal. It made them want to show up differently, not out of obligation but out of awakening. This is the power of divine revelation. God doesn't shame a person into change. He transforms them through truth. He reveals what they couldn't see. He opens the heart where fear once lived. He restores the softness that life tried to harden. And that's what happened to them. Their love didn't suddenly appear out of nowhere. It was always there, buried under fear, timing, immaturity, or distractions. But when God lifted the veil, they finally saw what their soul had known all along. You mattered. You were significant. You were divinely connected to their journey. And letting you go never sat right in their spirit. Now their heart is softer. Their awareness is clearer. Their understanding is deeper. Their intentions are purer. And this softness, this divine awakening, is one of the reasons the story is being rewritten instead of closed. Number 3, God removed the voices that confused their heart. There is a part of this story that many people overlook, yet it is one of the most important pieces of all. Because sometimes the greatest obstacle to a God-written connection is not distance, not fear, not timing, but the voices surrounding a person. Voices that planted doubt. Voices that stirred fear. Voices that projected insecurity. Voices that whispered negativity into their spirit. Voices that made them question what God had already confirmed in their heart. And for a long time, those voices were loud in their life. Some came from family members who meant well but couldn't see your heart the way God sees it. Some came from friends who were speaking from their own wounds, not from truth. Some came from past relationships that conditioned them to expect hurt, disappointment, or betrayal. And some came from their own inner critic, the part of them that believed they weren't ready, weren't capable, or weren't worthy of a love like the one they felt with you. These voices created noise. Noise that clouded their judgment. Noise that made them hesitate. Noise that made them second-guess the connection instead of leaning into it. Noise that convinced them to pull back emotionally, even when their heart was pulling them toward you. But here is the beauty of God's timing. Before He rewrites a love story, He silences every voice that would sabotage it. He removes the influence of negative opinions. He dims the noise of people who do not carry spiritual discernment. He dismantles lies that once shaped their choices. He clears away the fog created by outside pressure. And slowly, gently, but powerfully, He brings their heart back to clarity. For many of you, this is exactly what has been happening behind the scenes. People who once had strong opinions suddenly stopped speaking into their situation. Individuals who once discouraged the connection became preoccupied with their own lives. Conversations that once caused confusion simply faded away. And people who once had emotional control over them lost that influence, not out of anger but because God intervened. God removed the unnecessary noise so they could finally hear Him. And this is when the shift happened. They began thinking on their own. They began feeling with honesty again. They began discerning instead of reacting. They began recognizing what was real and what was rooted in fear. They began seeing you with their own eyes, not through someone else's opinion. When the wrong voices are removed, a heart can finally hear its own truth. And their truth was simple. Their connection with you was different. It was deeper. It was peaceful in a way they couldn't explain. It touched places in them no one else ever reached. It made them want to grow, want to communicate, want to show up differently. The absence of noise allowed them to feel what they couldn't feel before. The peace that followed your presence. The clarity that came with your energy. The sincerity in the way you loved. The loyalty you showed without being asked. The gentleness you offered even when you were hurting. The way your spirit made theirs feel safe. And once the noise quieted, they finally realized. The doubts were never theirs. The hesitation wasn't authentically coming from them. The confusion was planted. The distance was influenced. When God removed the external voices, their internal truth rose. And that truth brought them back to you. Not because they were pressured, Not because they were lonely, not because they were seeking comfort, but because clarity drew them in a way confusion never could. This is why the story is being rewritten. Not from old dynamics, not from outside influence, not from fear-driven decisions, but from clarity, from peace, from spiritual discernment, from the still, small voice of God guiding them toward what is aligned and away from what is chaotic. The reunion is forming because the noise is gone, and God finally has their full attention. Number 4, their healing opened their eyes to the love they couldn't see before. There is something profoundly sacred about healing, because healing is not just the absence of pain. It is the restoration of sight. It is the quiet moment when a heart that once felt numb begins to feel again. It is the moment when someone finally sees what was always there but was hidden behind old wounds, old memories, old patterns, and old defenses. And for your soulmate, healing didn't happen overnight. It didn't come through a single breakthrough moment. It wasn't a sudden explosion of clarity. It was slow. It was tender. It was sacred. It was God working in layers, one at a time, removing what they didn't even realize was shaping their decisions. Before healing, they saw you through the lens of their past, through the lens of fear, through the lens of distrust formed by people who mishandled their heart, through the lens of what if, and I'm not ready, and I can't go through that again, through the lens of survival rather than connection. You were offering love, but they were still operating from wounds. You were giving presence, but they were still responding from old reflexes. You were speaking from truth, but they were hearing through filters built from years of emotional residue. It wasn't that they didn't feel for you. They did. Deeply. More deeply than they ever admitted. But their healing had not yet caught up to their emotions. And until those wounds were addressed, they couldn't fully see you. So God began healing them in places no one could access. He began softening them in areas they hid from the world. He began untangling the emotional knots tied long before you entered their life. And slowly their vision began to clear. They started realizing how patient you had been, how consistent your heart was, how sincere your love felt, how calm your presence made them, how deeply you saw them, not the surface version but the real them, the parts they hide from others, the parts they didn't think anyone could ever understand. Healing revealed what fear had once blurred. Suddenly they could look back at your connection without their past interfering. Suddenly your kindness didn't intimidate them, it grounded them. Suddenly your depth didn't scare them, it drew them in. Suddenly your love didn't feel overwhelming, it felt safe. Suddenly your presence didn't trigger old fears, it soothed them. They began to understand the moments when you pulled back. They began to recognize how their silence hurt you. They began to see how their distance created confusion. They began to feel the weight of what they didn't express. And they realized something life-changing. They weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of being loved correctly. Because real love reveals wounds. Real love exposes the places we haven't healed. Real love demands emotional honesty. Real love requires vulnerability. Real love invites transformation. And for the first time they were ready. Ready to see you clearly. Ready to approach you without running. Ready to offer what they never could before. Ready to open their heart without fear leading the way. Ready to stop hiding behind bad timing, and maybe one day, and step into the truth of what they feel. Healing did not erase their love for you. It clarified it. It purified it. It deepened it. It matured it. It strengthened it. It took away the noise. It took away the hesitation. It took away the defensive walls that once kept you at arm's length. This is why your reunion carries such weight. Because it's not coming from pain, not from unhealed longing, not from emotional confusion, not from fear of losing you. It's coming from clarity, from peace, from emotional maturity, from spiritual alignment, from a heart that is no longer reacting, but choosing. Healing prepared them to love you the way God always intended. This next chapter is not the continuation of old patterns. It's the beginning of something God refined, God protected, and God restored. Number 5, God revealed the weight of your absence, and it shifted their spirit. There are certain realizations a person can only have in silence. Certain truths that only rise to the surface when everything else goes quiet. Certain awakenings that can't happen in the noise, in the rush, or in the middle of distractions. And for your soulmate, that awakening came through absence. Not because they wanted distance from you, but because God needed them still enough to hear Him clearly. There comes a moment where God allows someone to feel the ache of losing what was meant to be treasured. Not as punishment, but as revelation. Not to break them, but to wake them. Not to shame them, but to align them. And in your absence, God began showing them something they had pushed away, ignored, or misunderstood for far too long. He began showing them the truth of your value. They didn't realize how much your presence steadied them until it wasn't there. They didn't realize how deeply your voice softened their spirit until the silence set in. They didn't realize how much peace you carried until their days felt heavier without you. They didn't realize how much love they received from you until their heart felt the emptiness of missing it. Absence became the teacher they never wanted but desperately needed. There were moments they reached for their phone only to stop themselves. Moments when they wanted to explain everything but didn't know how. Moments when they replayed conversations, noticing the details they missed while distracted or afraid. Moments when they realized you weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for honesty, consistency, and effort. And they began to see the weight of it. They saw how you showed up, how you listened, how you cared, how you prayed, how you poured into them when you were tired yourself, how you believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves, how you held space for the parts of them they were still learning to accept. They saw it, and suddenly the loss hit deeper, because what you gave was rare, and what they felt with you was real, and what God revealed in your absence was undeniable. They had mistaken time for being something guaranteed. But God reminded them, time is a gift, not a promise. You were a glimpse of what they had prayed for, but because of fear, distraction, uncertainty, or emotional immaturity, they weren't fully ready to hold it. So God stepped in, not to separate, but to prepare. He showed them that the emptiness they felt wasn't just missing you, it was missing the version of themselves they were becoming when they were connected to you. Your presence brought out a strength in them. Your presence brought out gentleness. Your presence brought out honesty. Your presence stirred dreams that had been buried under disappointment. Your presence awakened a love they tried to convince themselves they didn't need. But when you stepped back, or when the connection shifted, they felt the weight of the void God deliberately allowed. Because sometimes, God lets a good thing go quiet so He can show someone what they couldn't see when it was loud. And this realization broke them open. They began to understand why your absence hurt so much. It wasn't just loneliness, it was clarity. Clarity about the connection. Clarity about their feelings. Clarity about their mistakes. Clarity about how deeply they cared. Clarity about the fact that what they tried to bury didn't go away. It grew. Your absence became the catalyst for their spiritual shift. It humbled them. It softened them. It matured them. It forced them to confront their patterns, their fears, and their emotional walls. And God whispered to them what their pride, their confusion, or their running prevented them from seeing. You were not supposed to lose this person. This awakening is why they're different now. Why they feel the urgency. Why they're ready to speak. Why they're done suppressing, denying, or resisting the truth. Your absence didn't push them away. It brought them home to themselves. And now, because of that, they're being guided back to you with a heart that finally understands the cost of losing something God actually ordained. Number 6. God softened their heart and removed the fear that kept them silent. Fear is one of the strongest forces in a person's emotional world. It can silence someone who wants to speak. It can freeze someone who wants to move. It can blind someone who already knows the truth. It can delay what God is trying to release. And for your soulmate, fear was the invisible wall standing between what they felt and what they had the courage to express. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough. Fear of repeating old mistakes. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of losing control. Fear of loving the wrong person even though their spirit knew you were right. Fear of stepping into something sacred when they felt unworthy of that kind of blessing. Fear turned their heart into a guarded place. Not because they didn't feel deeply for you, but because they felt too deeply. Some feelings scare people not because they are dangerous, but because they are holy. You awakened something they didn't know how to handle. And instead of leaning into that emotion, they tried to manage it from a distance. They told themselves they needed more clarity, more time, more certainty, more signs, more healing before allowing anything real. But the truth is, the healing they needed wasn't found in isolation. It was found in surrender. So God stepped into the space where fear was speaking louder than love. He began softening their heart. Not by force, but by truth. Not by pressure, but by revelation. God showed them that their fear wasn't wisdom. It was bondage. It wasn't protection. It was limitation. It wasn't discernment. It was avoidance. It wasn't the Holy Spirit. It was insecurity whispering louder than faith. And when God begins softening a heart, He does it layer by layer. First, He showed them their patterns. The moments they ran when they should have leaned in. The times they shut down instead of opening up. The ways they sabotaged connection without meaning to. The cycles that repeated every time love started feeling too real. Then He showed them their truth. That they weren't avoiding you. They were avoiding the parts of themselves they didn't want you to see. And then God did something even deeper. He removed the lie that they needed to be perfect before being loved. He removed the lie that vulnerability equals weakness. He removed the lie that real love ends in loss and disappointment. He removed the lie that they were safer alone. He began replacing fear with faith, insecurity with identity, walls with understanding, and confusion with clarity. And in that process they started to see you differently. Not as a risk, but as a blessing. Not as pressure, but as peace. Not as a threat to their heart, but as someone God hand-placed in their journey. Not as a temporary person, but as a purposeful one. Fear can't stay where God brings revelation. And slowly, the fear that once controlled their decisions began losing its grip. They felt more drawn to you. More open in their spirit. More honest with themselves. More willing to face the emotions they once tried to escape. Their hearts started softening in ways even they couldn't explain. For the first time, they didn't feel the impulse to run. For the first time, they didn't feel trapped by their feelings. For the first time, they didn't feel overwhelmed by the depth of the connection. They felt guided, held, prepared, strengthened, aligned. God was removing the fear that kept them silent. And when someone's fear dissolves, their truth rises. Their voice becomes clearer. Their intentions become stronger. Their heart becomes courageous. Their spirit starts reaching out. And that is exactly what is happening now. They're ready to express what they once buried. Ready to acknowledge what they once denied. Ready to pursue what they once paused. Ready to choose what they once feared. Ready to embrace the love God kept highlighting, even when they tried not to see it. Because when God softens a heart, He prepares it for connection. Not confusion. Reconciliation. Not running. Not fear. Your soulmate is stepping into a version of themselves they've never accessed before. A version grounded in truth, not trauma. Faith, not fear. Healing, not avoidance. And that shift is what's leading them back to you now, with a heart that can finally hold what God has been preparing all along. Number 7, God is aligning the final doorways. And the reunion is closer than you think. There comes a moment in every God-written love story when the spiritual shifts begin to show up in the natural. Where what was happening quietly in the background of your life begins to surface openly. Where the prayers you whispered in exhaustion start showing signs of being answered. Where the breakthroughs you felt in your spirit finally begin taking shape in reality. You are stepping into that moment now. Because God is aligning the final doorways. The pathways that once felt blocked are opening. The timing that felt delayed is accelerating. The silence that felt endless is about to break. The separation that felt painful is about to make sense. The confusion that surrounded the connection is being replaced with clarity. There is a divine orchestration happening around you. Something your eyes cannot yet see, but your spirit can already feel. God is bringing all the loose ends together. The internal work He did in you. The internal work He did in them. The healing that happened quietly. The growth neither of you shared publicly. The lessons learned separately that will soon benefit the relationship together. None of it was wasted. Even the waiting. Even the disconnect. Even the heartbreak. Even the moments where you felt forgotten or overlooked. God wasn't withholding love from you. He was preparing you for a love you wouldn't have been ready to sustain any earlier. And now, the final alignments are taking place. Your soulmate is stepping into a different awareness. Not just of who you are, but of what you represent. They're beginning to understand the weight of the connection, the depth of the bond, the spiritual significance of your presence in their life. They're recognizing the consistency of your spirit, how your heart never shifted away from truth, how your loyalty was never performative, how your compassion wasn't accidental, how your presence felt like home long before they had the words to admit it. God is also aligning their circumstances. The distractions that once pulled them away from you are losing their grip. The relationships that blurred their clarity are falling to the side. The responsibilities that overwhelmed them are becoming manageable. The emotional clutter that confused their heart is being cleared. The internal fears that clouded their decisions are dissolving. Everything that once stood between you is being moved, lifted, healed, or removed. But the most powerful shift is this. God is aligning their heart with courage. The courage to speak. The courage to reach out. The courage to admit what they truly feel. The courage to step into something sacred. The courage to choose love that is not convenient, but chosen, intentional, divine. And because of this realignment, the reunion you've been praying for is closer than you think. Closer than it looks. Closer than you feel. Closer than what your circumstances suggest. You are not waiting for coincidence. You are waiting for completion. God is not building a temporary moment. He is building a foundation. A foundation for communication. A foundation for emotional safety. A foundation for mutual understanding. A foundation for a connection that operates in truth, not uncertainty. The reunion isn't just two people returning to each other. It's two hearts meeting on the same page for the first time. Two spirits aligned under the same purpose. Two souls grounded in the same healing. Two lives ready to intertwine without fear, without hesitation, without confusion. You may not see the full picture yet, but the spiritual signs are already showing. The restlessness in your heart that doesn't feel anxious, just expectant. The peace that settles over you even without answers. The dreams that feel like reminders instead of fantasies. The sudden clarity about what you truly want. The emotional maturity you've stepped into without noticing. The way your spirit feels more ready than ever before. These are not random. They are confirmation. And your soulmate is experiencing their own version of these signs. Drawn to you in moments they can't explain. Thinking of you when they least expect to. Feeling a gentle push on their heart to make things right. Realizing the love they once feared is the love God preserved for them. You are not moving toward each other by emotion alone. You are being guided by divine alignment. Everything in their heart, their life, their spirit, and their environment is being positioned so the reunion doesn't just happen. It thrives. It lasts. It honors God. The story is not repeating, it's being rewritten. And the next chapter is closer than you think. As we close this message today, I want you to breathe, slowly, intentionally, deeply. Because what you've just heard is not random. It is not coincidence. It is not imagination. This entire journey, from the beginning of your connection to the moment you're sitting here listening right now, has been held, guided, and shaped by the hands of a loving Father who writes stories with purpose, precision, and mercy. You have not been forgotten. You have not been overlooked. You have not been replaced or dismissed. Your heart matters to God far more than you think. And every ache, every prayer, every moment of confusion, every night of heaviness, He has seen it all and used it all. Nothing in your story has been wasted. Not the delays. Not the silence. Not the time apart. Not the emotions you struggled to understand. Not the moments you questioned whether you misheard God or misread the signs. You were not wrong for loving. You were not foolish for believing. You were not misguided for sensing something deeper. Your spirit knew something your circumstances couldn't explain. And now, the pieces are finally aligning into a picture that makes sense. Your soulmate's journey was not easy, but neither was yours. Both of you had to walk through fire to reach clarity. Both of you had to heal wounds you didn't create. Both of you had to confront fears you didn't ask for. And both of you had to grow into the kind of people who can love without breaking each other. That growth wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And now, as God aligns what needs to align and softens what needs to soften, you are stepping into a season where His hand is undeniably present. A season where what once felt impossible becomes natural. Where what once felt blocked becomes open. Where what once felt painful becomes purposeful. Where what once felt uncertain becomes clear. The reunion ahead is not built on desperation, fantasy, or emotional hunger. It is built on healing, on spiritual maturity, on divine timing, on a love that was tested and strengthened, not destroyed. You are not returning to how things were. You are stepping into a restored, rewritten, spiritually aligned version of your story, one that honors the growth both of you have undergone. And I want you to enter this next chapter with peace, not pressure. With calm, not anxiety. With expectation, not fear. With trust, not doubt. Because when God is the one orchestrating the reunion, you don't have to force anything. You don't have to chase. You don't have to beg. You don't have to question your worth. You just have to stay aligned with Him. So as we close today, I want you to reflect on this. You are loved by God. You are chosen by God. You are protected by God. And any love God brings into your life will reflect His heart for you. If this message spoke to you deeply, if even one line felt like it touched something in your spirit, let me know in the comments. Your words matter here. Your story matters here. Your heart is seen here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss these teachings. We are building a family here, a community that grows together, heals together, and walks through love with wisdom and spiritual grounding. And if you feel led, if you want to support the channel and these messages, your super thanks is always appreciated and always used to keep this content flowing. But more than anything, I want you to walk away with this truth. God is rewriting your story. Nothing is lost. Nothing is ruined. Nothing is too far gone. And the reunion coming into your life is not simply emotional. It is divine. Take courage. Stay aligned. Keep your heart open. Your story is not ending. It is just beginning. Amen.